the payments and remittance industry is extremely important. As you know, perhaps, I believe about 1 in 7 people around the globe are involved with remittances. And that's around about 200 million people are sending money home to enable and assist 800 million people. If you think of just the statistics, 650 billion was sent back and forth just last year. But those are the official stats from the World Bank. Unofficially, it could be anywhere up to 2 trillion. And as somebody who uses the remittance service to help family back home as well, and especially during the pandemic, what you did and what you enabled was truly fantastic. You really empowered people to be able to support their loved ones during a very difficult period. So I think a big round of applause to everybody here, but also those watching online too for the wonderful work that you did. Thank you. On with the show. You ready? Great! Welcome to today's event. Now, we are delighted that you can join us physically and online. Let's have a round of applause to all of our folks joining us from around the world, well over 1,000, still in their pajamas, in their fluffy slippers. They are lucky. They are so blessed. Now, we're delighted that you're here to support the Innovation in Payments and Remittances Global Hybrid event. Now, IPR has been created to bring together the global industry of stakeholders, visionaries, and business leaders to make informed decisions and drive positive change. Now, today you're going to hear from many positive, prominent speakers, not just in this session, but throughout all sessions today and tomorrow, who are going to be speaking on a range of topics aimed to discuss, to share best practices, engage, learn, discover, and create opportunities and shape change. Now, the organisers behind the event are RemitONE, who are an award-winning UK-headquartered fintech firm, who are providing a range of technology products and services to the money transfer, foreign exchange, and payments industry. Let's hear it for RemitONE. Well done. Now, the mission is to empower the global money transfer industry and to provide fair transfers for those who need it most. So you can see IPR is really an extension of this mission, and we're delighted to have you here today to be part of this visionary goal. Now, we'd like to spend a special thanks to all of our sponsors, without whom we wouldn't be sitting here today. So please make sure that you have a chat with them during the breaks. And if you're joining online, please visit the online exhibitor booths as well, where you can engage with their virtual stands. And I believe these are the sponsors that have very kindly supported the event to make it happen. Let's have a look at the sponsors. There we go. Let's have a round of applause to all of our sponsors who have supporting the IPR Global event. Thank you. Now on to our first panel discussion. So we have 1.5 hour session for this session, which will be moderated with our expert panelists. As you can see on the screen, these are people who are working within the payments remittance industry, who are bringing a phenomenal amount of wealth and expertise to today's discussions. Now, the session will be 1 hour with 30 minutes for a Q&A session at the end. For those joining online, you can actually submit your questions via the Q&A button on the right-hand side of your screen at any point during the panel. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. For those of you here in the room with us, if you have a question, please do put your hands up and someone will come to you with a microphone. When you ask a question, please give us your name, what company you're from, and please direct your question to the moderator who will then be moderating the session. Okay, are we ready to go for our first panel discussion? That was so lackluster. Let's try again. Are we ready? Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, let us start. Now, the first session we have is the growing money transfer industry, which is unlocking new revenue streams and seizing opportunities. Now, as you know, the international money transfer market has seen an enormous rate of change over the years, resulting in new technology endless opportunities for expanding into neighbouring verticals. Now, in this session, we'll hear expert predictions on upcoming trends and how to capitalise on industry growth. Now, today's panellists, I am pleased to introduce, first and foremost, is Sharon Gibson, who is the CEO of JMMB Money Transfer. She is a seasoned financial expert with over 2 decades at managerial level in Jamaican industry with a proven track record of delivering exceptional client experience, driving innovation and achieving solid results, as evidenced by the subsidiary's growth in revenue and market share. Sharon serves as a director of the Jamaica Money Remitters Association and a member of the Modernisation of Jamaica's Remittance Industry Project Steering Committee. Let's hear it for Sharon. Next, we have Moosa Manjra, who's the CEO of the Hello Group and Daytona Capital Management. Moosa has an excellent track record in innovating the fintech space. Currently, he looks after a suite of fintech services from money remittance to digital banking and insurtech offerings for the Hello Group. Let's hear it from Moosa. We have Habib Ansari, who is the head of sales UK for Worldline. Now, Habib is the UK country head at Worldline, leading the e-payments team within the Merchant Services Regional Business Unit. His mission is to drive commercial growth for a wide range of clients in the UK. Let's hear it for Habib.
Thank you.
And we have Hasan, who is the Deputy CEO at Fardan Exchange. Hasan has demonstrated a history of working in the financial services industry and is skilled in operations management, strategy and cash management, which you could say the same with our Chancellor. Now, Hasan is a financial services professional with a Bachelor of Science focused on mechanical engineering from the American University of Sharjah and a degree in project management from the Auckland University of Technology. Let's hear it for Hasan Jabber. Last but not least, our moderator for today's session is Aamer Abedi. He is a marketing professional with over 20 years of experience across the IT, finance, retail and telecom sector. He has marketed business solutions encompassing remittance systems, ECM, IVR and PIM technologies in Europe, North America and the Middle East. Aamer oversees RemitONE's international sales and marketing operations and manages strategic partnerships with gold partners and resellers. Welcome, Aamer Abedi.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Bismillah. The Borderless Payments Report 2022 by MasterCard, they surveyed 7,000 individuals and 3,000 SMEs. And the data revealed the following. 40% of consumers who sent a cross-border payment last year said their family members would not have survived financially without the funds. Around 70% of SMEs say the global payment network helped them endure the pandemic. Around 75% of consumers use mobile apps to send and receive money today. And nearly 50% of senders and 32% of receivers use website-based platforms from banks, money transfer companies, or other providers. Around a third of the consumers worldwide sent or received money in person last year at either a bank branch or money transfer company. And here are some other interesting stats. I found them fascinating. 71% of consumers agree that though they can now travel, they would still go through online payments for ease. And then around 60% of the SMEs say they are sending and receiving more cross-border payments now than they were before the pandemic. So this is a significant increase from 2020. Now, the trend is consistent in every country in the study, literally every country. The SMEs in every country are saying the same thing, that they are doing more cross-border payments than they were before the pandemic. Notable countries mentioned in the study were India, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, China, and the US. Safe, fast, and transparent. That's what the consumers and businesses look for in an online cross-border payment solution. Safe is, of course, security, fast is speed, and transparency is, transparency. Although cost is important to users, this is really interesting, it's not at the top of the list. So the cost is not really at the top of the list according to this study. In fact, at a global level, it's not even in the top 5. So with that being said, consumers and businesses want competitive FX rates, and they want full breakdown of cost and final payment amounts. According to the IFAD, which is the International Fund for Agricultural Development, a UN associated organization, remittances can be costly to send, but technical innovations like blockchain and mobile money are the solution to keeping costs down. Partnerships among public and private sector stakeholders have paved the way for lowering the cost of remittances and provided financial services for migrants and their families. Thank you for your attention. We shall be discussing these stats and more in more detail over the next 2 days. I would like to now seek input from my honorable guests here on this panel. So I'll start off with a question from Ms. Sharon Gibson from JMMB, one of the biggest money transfer companies in Jamaica, and from Mr. Moosa Manjra from Hello Group, one of the biggest money transfer brands from South Africa, well known across Africa. According to the World Bank's latest migration and development brief, officially recorded remittance flows are expected to increase by 4.2% to hit $630 billion by year end. This follows an almost record recovery of 8.6% in 2021. What factors do you think have contributed to this growth, and what are the threats to this growth? I'll start with Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Aamer. It's a pleasure being here. Well, for one, we know that in the source countries, there were government stimulus packages that provided financial support for millions, which include migrants, of course. And so those migrants were able to send additional funds to their friends and family in their home countries. For example, in the US, 1.9 trillion was used for the stimulus package between April of 2020 to May of 2022. So as a result of that, these funds would have helped a lot of migrants who in turn was able to help their friends and families in their source countries. In the UK here, I think it was 10 billion, 30 billion that was used as a stimulus package. And that too was primarily for the industry for the business industry, correct. And so they were able to help these individuals, who of course included migrants as well. So that was one of the areas that we see. And the other one was that the improvement of migrants based on their essential services. So what we found was that because you found persons that were in the medical profession, education, hospitality industry, and so on, those were considered essential services during the time of the pandemic. And so they had job security, and by extension, they were able to send additional funds to friends and families overseas.
Thank you, Sharon. That's interesting. Moosa, your take?
Yeah, thanks, Aamer. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my take is slightly different. So I think the biggest thing for us, between 2020 and 2021, we had a sort of a hard lockdown. Was very difficult. The stimulus packages, Sharon alluded to, unfortunately, in Africa, migrants don't qualify for that. It would only be citizens of those countries. But they've had to become, they're resilient as it is, and they needed to get out there and start working, and they were the first ones, to find a way, even during the lockdown, to earn money when all of us were scared to go out. Someone had to go and do the work, and this is the way they would go out and earn, because nobody was giving any handouts to migrants. So, and then when the lockdowns all kind of subsided, it just kind of spiraled on from there and grew from there. So, yeah, I think if you're comparing 2020, it was a bit of a down year. So anything from that time onwards would be considered huge amounts of growth. But it's just the sheer resilience and knowing, nobody's going to come and help you. So you got to go out there and fend for yourself. And this is why you see the remittance industry thriving. It's not so much of a choice. It's something that they have to go out and do, and this is what we've seen.
Interesting. And in terms of the split between digital and cash, how is it in South Africa, for example?
Yeah, and cash is, we all know the saying, cash is king. But what the pandemic did do is it did speed up the digital transformation for us, because you couldn't go out, you couldn't go and deposit cash, you couldn't. A lot of the places were obviously closed and so on. So they had to migrate to a digital solution. So we've seen on our digital bank, we've seen many more customers come on and start transacting from a stage and pay to a pure online transaction, just because of the pandemic. They had no choice but to get on board. And now that they are, they love it. I mean, they don't want to go out and use cash. Employer pay me straight into my bank account, and I'll use that to remit my funds back home. So yeah, for us, I can say the pandemic, was pro-digitization.
So I mean, it's interesting. We have an interesting mix here. We have Hasan from Fardan, from Ascending Market. We have Worldline, Habib from Worldline, from payments. You are, of course, from South Africa, and of course, Pan-African settlements you do. So we have two send markets. Sharon's coming at it from a receiving market angle, Jamaica. So cash is king. What's everyone's take? So obviously, Moosa, you've made, so I read the stat earlier, a third of all the consumers worldwide sent cash in person. That's a very interesting statistic. 3 years ago, this wasn't the case. Cash was, in excess of 80%. So something obviously drastic has happened, but the study by MasterCard also revealed the behavior of customers has changed. Like you said, now that they're used to this,
It was that stigma of, you don't want to touch the money anymore. Like, I might get COVID, if I was to touch this money. So nobody knew. So you just better to be safe. Just put in my bank account and I'll remit it from there. Yeah. So yeah, this played a huge.
But the behavior has changed over the last 2 years. That's interesting. What's your take, Hasan, hailing from a key sending market like the UAE? Cash is king. What's your take on that?
It's quite controversial. Yes, we agree that there has been, adaptation of digital payments and transformation in the payment industry. Like the rest of the world, UAE, regardless send or receive, there was we had to expedite our digital transformation, and we had to offer what we had to offer digitally. And we could see that this was the only way to get out of it. But on the contrary, I'd like to highlight that cash has also seen an increase in our part of the world. I'll speak for myself. At Fardan Exchanges, we're seeing exponential growth in cash dealings now, whether on wholesale or on retail over the counter. Obviously, with less for retail individuals, more on wholesale and B2Bs. So I'd say that this is something that we cannot ignore. Cash remains to be very dominant in the business. Perhaps the cost of managing that cash has increased because of the shift that's happened to the digital ecosystem. But yeah, I'd say cash remains very significant.
Just out of curiosity, what's the percentage split pre-pandemic and post-pandemic in a key market like the UAE? If you have those figures, if you don't.
Look, what I have on top of my mind is the banknote division has increased in three-digit figures. Which is very big for us, but that doesn't mean that it was on the expense of the digital payment streams. Digital still remains on the growth. Cash as a wholesale plays a significant way in our P&L.
And same question to Habib. I'm sure I know what you're going to say. So yeah, cash is king. Your take?
Firstly, thank you for having me. Nice to meet all of you. So from our perspective, cash is king. Yes, but to a certain extent. We see it that cash is still being used because it's heavily associated with this industry historically. but the behavior has changed, as Moosa rightfully pointed out. And that is a lot to do with the adoption of consumers, senders, being led in that direction or being forced in that direction or choosing that direction of making payments online, sending money online. So it's very much down to actually the region as well. That's what we see. So, we can talk about the culture in different countries. People prefer to pay with cash. And that is something that historically they like doing, and it's very much associated with their behavior. But at the same time, there's been a massive adoption online, as we've said, purely because convenience. We've seen over the course of years the rise of different payment methods, e-wallets as a prime example. It's so easy to actually make a payment now. We have technology out there that can make it quick, fast. Some of the facts that you were reading out are completely in line with what's happening in the industry today. So we are seeing both sides of the coin. However, more and more we are seeing businesses, countries follow the digital transformation route because there is an uplift in usage of online payments.
A question for you then, based on what you just said. Mobile wallets, if in key receiving continents like Asia, Africa, and South America, mobile wallets use various technologies. USSD, for example, is one example. M-Pesa, they use USSD, I believe, unless they've changed something. But payment processes. What's your vision of payment processes in these continents?
So some are ahead of others. Some are playing catch up. Not every player out there is able to offer the right payment methods. Some are still working with the traditional payment methods, which is governed by the consumers. It is the case that from a technology perspective, we are all thriving or striving rather to get to that point where we can be in a position where we're able to provide a scalable solution that offers the right payment method of choice. And, we do have countries in Europe, for example, that still do cash, right? Not only within this industry, but retail as well. So it's not like cash is completely dead, right? And I don't think it will get to that. I think it will just become a payment method amongst a host of other payment methods. And really, it's then up to the sender to pick whichever payment method they want to use.
Just for the benefit of the audience, so the payment method, can you give examples of?
Yeah, absolutely.
Payment
So
methods?
payment method is cash. So specifically, it's a mechanism of somebody picking a tender like cash or cards, for example, to make payment, to send money in this world, you could say. They could do it through local cards, so not everyone has a Visa, MasterCard or an Amex card. They could do it through wallets like PayPal or Apple Pay or Google Pay. But at the same time, you've got local bank transfers, online bank transfers. You have in other industries, you have, buy now, pay later, which I'm sure personally some of you have experienced using. So there is a whole host of different payment methods, but it's not so much about, having every single payment method under the sun being available. It's very much kind of like a mapping exercise where you are in terms of your region, you have to understand the requirements. And it is the case that one region will have, Visa, MasterCard as the primary payment methods, but other regions will have bank transfers or cash. So you have to understand the requirements of your consumers and then provide the right payment methods.
It's interesting, you mentioned buy now, pay later. This is in the last 15 years, it's a new topic, it's a new term that I've seen in the remittance industry.
Yeah.
I was in Saudi Arabia earlier this year, and there was a project that was going on with one of the biggest banks there, and they were talking about buy now, pay later. It's actually remit now, pay later, right? And I know there are some projects being run in the US as well. So it's interesting, right? And obviously then payments, as payments giants yourselves, you have a role to play here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Thank you, Habib. move to Sharon. How significant is the cross-border payments industry, and who are the traditional and new players in this ecosystem, in your view?
So I will speak about Latin America and the Caribbean, of which I'm familiar. So during the pandemic in 2020 to 2021, we realized that for the Latin American and the Caribbean industry, it grew by $128 billion. That's a 26% increase over the prior year of 2020. And when we further down into Jamaica, when we look at Jamaica, or Bank of Jamaica, which is our regulator, stated that for 2021, remittance grew to 3.5 billion, moving from 2.9 in the prior year, which is a 21% increase. And listening to my colleagues, it's similar to what's happening in Jamaica about cash is king versus the digital. But because of the lockdowns and, of course, the reduced time for the agents to be open, there was a different demand for the clients, the beneficiaries. So what happened is that we moved to a digital process, even though it was there before, but it accelerated because now persons were moving. The agents were closed, so how am I going to get my cash? So bank deposit became a good thing, especially during that period. So there was an acceleration for the digital services versus the inline.
Right. Okay, thank you. There were lots of mergers and acquisitions over the last 2 years, 3 years. Some big names, of course, Visa, MasterCard making significant acquisitions. And a lot of businesses went bust as well. This is an open question to anybody. What can, and being in the industry that I'm in, that we are in, we get a lot of inquiries from fintech startups, right? And they're always asking the same question. So what are the USPs they should have to survive now in this post-pandemic period? Obviously, you come with a wealth of experience. You've been on your own individual journeys with your respective organizations. For the fintech startups, and I understand from the 1,100 online viewers today, they'll be looking at that as well. So anything you can advise them? Hasan?
Yes, you're absolutely right on that one, Aamer. We can see a lot of new entries to the market. We tend to support that. We enable them. Obviously, they have to have very clear understanding of the business. Numbers are very tempting in our part of the world, but really the biggest I'd say challenge that we face when we deal with them is on the compliance front. A lot of them perhaps are very young, I'd say, companies that have fair understanding of the payments flows on the tech side, but not necessarily on the risk and compliance side, which often is a showstopper for a lot of these guys. And then once you hit a wall with a regulator, or I think it becomes very problematic for them to adapt to these kind of frameworks. But I think if I were to point out on one thing that we find it a little bit challenging to see in terms of adaptation is really the compliance and risk and governance on that side. And you rightly mentioned that a lot of them go bust, which also is a problem for our industry as a whole, because as far as a consumer is concerned, a lot of them are very strong in marketing. They spend a lot in pushing their platforms. They have great interface, user experience and all of that. What happens at the back end is not, a normal consumer's problem. They might be, riding on other channels, but then what this causes when they go bust and when monies go missing is a disturbance to the entire ecosystem, which we are part of, and we cannot ignore that. So I think it is our duty as well to control that and help in providing the right guidance if need be, because eventually this does affect the entire industry, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned compliance, regulation, of course. our regulators, in your view, is again, it's an open question. I'll just pick on Moosa because so in your opinion, how are the regulators encouraging growth in this industry? So obviously you'll come at it from SARB's perspective, I take it.
Yeah, I guess it depends which jurisdiction, you know, whether it's the UAE or South Africa or in Africa. I think they're trying. They're trying. Maybe, you know, they don't have as much experience, you know, on the ground, or what the actual need is, or what they don't realize the time that it takes for them to, you know, to make a decision on something. I think that's what, you know, has the biggest impact. But yeah, I think it's a fair comment to say they are trying. It's just taking longer than what a customer would like. You know, we'd like to give them that value today because we understand what it means to them. We understand what it means to the receiver. We understand that you need to do certain things to drive the cost down. And the longer we take, you know, to make these decisions, it just impacts the wrong people, you know. So yeah, but I think they try.
I think Habib also, yeah, you wanted to add something to this.
Yeah, I think, yeah, from a regulator's perspective, I think it's difficult for them to encourage growth because their primary objective is safety, security, and having best interest in mind for the senders and the receivers. So their main focus is to make sure that everyone's operating, or the frameworks we're talking about, is safe, secure, and gives peace of mind to everyone. In that, like Moosa alluded to, it's, yeah, they try, but they find it difficult, in our view, to actually encourage growth. Or maybe it's they aren't able to encourage it in the right way because their primary objective is compliance, safety, framework, and ensuring that everyone is protected as best as possible.
There's lots of evidence in the market, in the industry, to suggest, you know, new technologies. I mean, I'm not saying this is United Nations. IFAD is saying this. You know, they talking about technologies like blockchain, for example, which has already made inroads into the remittance industry. It's not like blockchain is some new term anymore. Yeah, there is tech out there as well to support this growth. And you know, what's your view on? Because you mentioned regulators are concerned about safety. There's a lot of technology out there, right, that ensures safety. Like to the max. And I suppose it varies from region to region, and you know, there's behavior as well, consumer behavior as well. Would you say that, again, open question, would you say it's the consumer behavior that's driving this change, that's getting the regulators to rethink their strategy, or is it something else? Is it consumer driven, or is it regulatory driven?
So from our perspective, from a payments perspective, it is complicated and complexities are involved purely because, like you said, it is to a certain extent consumer driven purely because of the type of payment method they use. So some payment methods are guaranteed payment methods. So in that respect, it's actually great. You offer it and everyone's covered. But then at the same time, the primary payment methods that are used today, they carry the risk. So I think it's yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So Sharon, you want to add something?
I'm in total agreement with what has been said. In addition to that, as it relates to safety for the regulators, cybersecurity also plays an important role, because what you find is because of using these digital capabilities, they have to ensure that the procedures that are in place and the firewalls and so on to protect the clients from cybercrime.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting work happening, of course, Sharon, in your region as well. Just like to get your take, actually, on the role of peripheral services such as gift cards, data bundles, airtime, loans, etc. How is it in your industry?
It's increasing, and it does play a part. I'll use that airtime, for example. In Jamaica, a lot of persons receive airtime credit from their family and friends in the source countries. For example, there's one telecommunications business that allows for credit from anywhere in the world for prepaid cards. And when we look, there has been a growth in the airtime space in Jamaica for the last 5 years, and it is expected to continue growing.
Great, perfect.
As it relates to the gift cards, that too is growing. And I'll just use the prepaid card as an example. So before, it was only the banks which would use a credit card or a debit card to shop online. But now with the prepaid cards, clients will be able to do shopping online just as the bank. And so funds can be sent to these cards by the migrants.
And this is already happening, right?
Yes.
This is already happening.
Yes. So it will continue to grow.
Right. And Moosa, you've seen this as well, right? I'm sure you have something to add.
Yeah, we offer it on our digital bank as well. Airtime, local, international, bill payments, insurance services. What we do is we just try and curate it specifically for migrant customers. So it's not so much that they don't want it. They don't want insurance, or they don't want life cover, or it's for us, we see they don't have access to it. And when you give them access to it, then they do take it. So yeah, we've seen a huge demand in VAS services, especially international VAS services into Africa.
Hasan, you want to add?
Has always been there. This has always been a complementary service that we have in whether physically or digitally on our app. We see growth, but what we're trying to do now is we want to capitalize on the need of these value-added services and perhaps bundle it in such a way where it is no more, like you said, send. We also want it to be a pull relationship, because it's if I were to use the term behavior, consumer behavior into this is, money is sent from point A to point B to an individual, and then what happens to the money there? This is what we can try and understand. You're looking at countries like India or Egypt. From a receive point of view, it's huge from the UAE, and we've also noticed that the increase and growth of wallets there, and how we can do the last mile. So this is where if I were to connect these value-added services that we have with the last mile, determination of these funds, how can it happen? So this is where you are then you are expanding your peripherals, you're finding new ways to provide these services. So it is increasing, we see it, and not just to these classic corridors, but also to parts of the world that we've never looked at before.
But okay, I was again, as I mentioned, I was in Saudi Arabia, and I was using one of the mobile taxi apps, right? Well-known brands, of course, as everybody knows. But it's not that brand that you guys are thinking of. One of their local competitors. They have an app. I ordered a taxi. I can do a range of things. I can order food, of course, and all that. That's already there. It's been there, done that, right? But they actually send you a nurse to do a COVID test to your house. So these are the innovation is completely on another level now. These things are happening. So the question is, I suppose it doesn't impact Worldline as much because you're coming from a payments background. You'll become part of the ecosystem. But for MTOs, right? How are the MTOs looking at this? This emergence of super apps, big organizations with massive customer base, and they can just turn on the switch, right? And basically tap into your space, compete with you, because they already have an established audience, for example, right?
On the contrary, I don't see it as competition. We complement each other, it's an opportunity for both of us to provide better services. And here Moosa is looking at me. Moosa, we work very closely with, for example, Hello Paysa in the UAE and for Africa. In fact, no, it is consumer driven, all of it. So if the MTO has a connection or a service that can I can provide to my customer or vice versa. There's always, I think there's a terminology that I always like to use. There's competition, there is cooperation, and then there's co-opetition in between. And this is what we do. And this is really the relationship with MTOs and how it can be cascaded down to as a service to the customers.
Customer stickiness. So customer stickiness is very important, of course, customer loyalty. In some markets, there is a lot of customer stickiness. In some markets, one can argue there isn't much. People will just go for, the cheapest provider of services, for example. But what in your opinion, and this question is for Hasan and Moosa, Hasan and Habib. Moosa, feel free to answer this question as well. What are the MTOs doing to improve customer stickiness? Keeping in mind what we just talked about, this competition from these.
Look, I'd like to answer this in two ways. I think loyalty programs and is one thing, and this is something it really is the most effective way, which customers also understand. You want to provide something that is also accepted by consumers, but if I would say this very bluntly. Customers are not as loyal as they used to be, per se, if I should say, because of the availability of so many options now, and thanks to the digital presence of all these services, it almost became a marketplace. Yeah. So really, how do you measure stickiness then? This is the question. Is it price? Is it service? I agree that pricing is not was never, a factor or an element in deciding the choice, but we cannot also ignore that. So maybe it takes more than just a loyalty program or advertisement to keep these customers sticky to you. But at the end of the day, what matters is the transparency. This is one thing that you see lots of talks about in our industry: transparency and visibility over the transaction. This always helps in keeping the customer updated on the transactions. It's not easy as the way we say it. There's a lot of technical works that gets involved in that. There's a lot of players that are involved in that. But I think this is one of the things that we see that is very effective in terms of keeping the customer loyal to you in a way or another.
Yes, Azra, it's not just about price. So I'll give you an example. When the pandemic hit, we got a neighbor to South Africa, Zimbabwe. I'm sure you guys are all familiar, and they had a problem with basic commodities, sugar, oil, rice, and what we built in just a few months, and we launched it, was the same way you'd send money from one country to another, for example, into Zimbabwe, and you get US dollar. This way, the customer in the Zimbabwean in South Africa could go onto our app. It's called malacha.com, and he would shop as you and I would do online. But he's shopping for groceries, meaning sugar, oil, rice, etc. And when his mom gets the SMS on that side to go and collect, instead of getting $60 US, she gets a bag of groceries. And we've partnered with a local supermarket, on a supermarket chain on that side. So it's about partnerships and giving the customer value, solving a problem. You want advice for startup, solve a problem. If you're not solving a problem, just stop. Just stop, because you're going to waste a lot of people's time and your money if you are not solving a problem. So this way, we also give the customer control. A lot of money gets sent, it's not used for the right reason. So this way, they can ensure that X amount, you got the groceries. So you can't call me again and say, we're hungry or we don't have groceries, the kids don't have groceries. This way, we've taken care of that. So here's the supplementary remittance to go with it. So it's just one example, to make a customer loyal, or solve his problem, and chances are we'd stay with you longer than maybe some other players.
That's great. I mean, we have eternal optimists here, which is, of course, I truly respect. You don't see them as competitors, you see them as opportunities to work together, right? So all these fintech companies, new startups, new players in the market, as long as they're solving a problem, money transfer industry is there to support them and work with them. That's what we're saying here.
Yeah, I mean, it's local knowledge, you know, where we're pretty present in the UAE part. I mean, that's the king over there. So you got to learn. You got to see what they're doing. You shouldn't be like, you know, we know everything. We're going to go there, we learn, we listen, we take advice, and then we go and put our own spin on it.
But I think in this scenario, it's not just, it's not Hasan, you're not relying just on Hasan. What Hasan is saying, and what you're saying as well, is that other new problem solvers, new fintech players who are coming, they just plug into the equation. They become part of the supply chain.
Absolutely, Aamer. I mean, we are enablers. Fardan exchange in the UAE is an enabler. We have played a vital role in plugging in a lot of fintechs in the UAE. We have obviously said more no than yes to a lot of players, principal players who wanted to enter the UAE. On the paper, they look like competitors. But on the contrary, we have worked with big brands and we've enabled them. And their app today is one of the leading apps in the country. And there's absolutely no problem with that. Again, we believe in an ecosystem. And this is the strength. And this is really, when we say adaptation and digital transformation, it's not just upscaling your servers and no, it really is the last mile. It comes back to the last mile and how we can look. It's no more. Look, customers are also educated. You know, their awareness level has gone higher than what you and I would have thought of about 5-10 years ago. We have customers who get in either into a branch or an app, and they know all of it. They know the route, they know the charges, they know back-end charges. They have everything. They have all the information. So they're quite educated. So you're talking to this kind of customer. So you cannot have that. You cannot live in your igloo anymore. You cannot live that and ignore what's happening around you. And I think we have succeeded in doing this. We have too many successful stories to talk about here, which is open to public. And the world is huge, Aamer. There are so many countries, there are so many different regulators, means of payments, and I think it always is important to work with others.
I think you used a good term, enabler. So Sharon, you are obviously, and I'll come to Habib as well on this, but obviously his perspective will be from the payment side. But you're also an enabler, right? And can you just give us your perspective on, for example, the interesting stuff that you're doing that can help our fintech audience as well?
So because we are, of course, use RemitONE, and so we're able to use other fintech companies can plug into our ecosystem. So what you find is that individual fintech companies as well as traditional remittance companies who weren't a part of the Latin American Caribbean region are able to do so. Because of course, by using their APIs and the plugins that we speak about, they're able to come to market much quicker. And of course, because of this, it drives the competition. So the cost of doing business is, of course, is lowering. And so we'll be able to pass on some of these savings to our clients.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've just been reminded that we only have 5 minutes. So in closing, Habib, if you could just sum up your thoughts in just...
on the loyalty.
On the loyalty.
So I think what the guys have said is on point. Loyalty programs heavily depend on collaboration with different partners. And in some cases, they, entail working with people within your remit to making sure that, the consumer is getting the right thing. But also at the same time, what makes consumers be a little bit more sticky is actually their experience with you in terms of how easy is it to use your systems? How easy is it to just go back and just, have a scenario where they can just literally reduce the steps in order to sending their money? So as long as, you're able to demonstrate trust, secure, and convenience on your systems, you'll find that people are coming back to you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, everybody. We've got 3 minutes. Any last minute comment before we open the floor to questions?
No, bring it.
Yeah.
Bring it. Can we start with the questions? We're happy to take questions now. Yeah, can we take some questions from the audience? My colleague Arif Khan has the mic. Yeah.
Hi and welcome everybody. Lubin Reyes here, CMS. I just wanted to add one quick point on the cash and then one quick question to the panel. I myself processed $1.4 billion worth of UK cash in 2016. Cash was certainly king, but I think now cash is the only option for some people. If you think that 60,000 migrants have arrived in the UK across the channel, they don't exactly going to get a bank account tomorrow at Barclays. They're not going to get a bank account in Revolut. That equates to around 24 to 30 million sterling per month if you equate each person sending around £400. So if you think about that, cash is an option that they only have. So we have to have the systems both in the UK and in some other countries to be able to still process cash because otherwise it becomes very few companies provide that service. It's only 1 or 2 players, for example, in the UK, and creating very shocking uncompetitive practices between them. And the only person that gets affected is the consumer because they don't know how to send that money, and then it becomes underground. And unfortunately, that's happening more and more here in the UK. And then finally, I think just wanted to add on global instability at the moment. We've seen how the Nord Stream pipe suddenly just broke up in the middle of the ocean. Internet lines are very easily damaged in the sea. We don't know what could happen. We have a defense minister traveling to the USA yesterday very secretly. Anything can happen. And the question is, are money transfer companies prepared for a digital blackout? What other contingency plans do we have to revert back to the good old days of fax, telephone, SMS? And have we thought about that?
That is a brilliant question. Yeah. Anyone want to take that?
Happy to take it.
Yeah.
The 2 parts to it, the cash, which substantiates my claim, and thank you for that. I agree with you that, we have to be a little careful on how much we. I have to be very careful on using the next term. How we deal with consumers. Otherwise, our job here is to protect this ecosystem and keep it always in the legal channels, because those same people are also using illegal channels to transfer funds. So it's a very thin line, and that we have to be cautious of. Now, on the other side,
the digital blackout scenario.
Pandemic was a fantastic example, and I'll speak on behalf of my company. We were able to actually overnight go back to the basics, literally basics, everything, because we didn't have CIT agents to move funds. We did not have cards, didn't make sense because people were in lockdown. And in the UAE, we have the wage protection system, which is a huge segment of the workforce. They are unbanked. So we provide them banking solutions. So they are holding our cards. And these guys couldn't leave their premises to go and in cash use the ATM or whatnot. So we had to literally go back to the whiteboard and sketch everything from scratch, and we were able to do it. I think I always believe in a hybrid model of anything we do. There has to always be a business contingency plans for business to continue. We're also very careful on where we host our servers and data and all these things. Everything is very well calculated, and I think pandemic was the best stress test that we had to prove that. And not a lot of organizations, by the way, were able to actually shift immediately. Perhaps this was an opportunity for those who were able to do so, to excel in what they were offering.
Great.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, business continuity is the key factor here. And again, the stress test, pandemic stress test has actually allowed a lot of digital companies to look at scenarios which we would never have thought about, 4 or 5 years ago. So it is very much around having a disaster recovery process in place, multiple sites to help with certain scenarios in place, but also actually offering some modern and basic ways of actually triggering payments, like SMS messages, right? So we can't always heavily reliant on the digital infrastructure. So companies out there have evolved to help with certain type of disasters, call it.
Anyone from the, David?
Hi guys. David here, David Lambert from Transact 365. So we're a payments platform, and this is kind of directed mainly to Habib, but I'm sure others may have input as well. So we live in a new world order. Just made some notes. From a payments perspective, we've seen the collapse of a Wirecard, German bank. We're post-pandemic. We have a fragmentation of Europe, a massive fragmentation. Brexit, the war in the Ukraine, so many factors that are affecting almost everything, not just in remittances, but certainly in payments in a wider spectrum. But where I see things, because I work with a number of MSBs, is that things are tightening up to a level where it's almost becoming impossible for acquirers to really support and comprehensively work with MSBs now. So we see tighter margins. We see in a post-Brexit environment potential opportunism from Visa and MasterCard in terms of actually whacking up the costs across Europe. So unlocking new revenue streams and seizing opportunities. How does Worldline, as an acquirer, see opportunity, or certainly ways to work with MSBs in this new world order? Because there are so many now obstacles, and even when you've done your job, it's very difficult for these MSBs to obtain banking facilities as well. So where does Worldline see the online space going? We talked about alternative payment methods, local payment methods, Visa, MasterCard. Where does Worldline see the support for smaller, emerging, even bigger MSBs with all of these things going on right now?
Thank you for the question. When you say MSBs, can you open that term up just so I know I've got the same acronym in mind?
It's money service business.
Thank you. So in terms of, we have so many acronyms, MTOs, MSB, I just want to be sure.
Think of MTOs.
So in terms
FX
of your question, I think, unfortunately, it's not a great situation because the environment we're in, everything's going up. Cost of processing, cost of banking, literally even from a business perspective, you can take into account overheads. So naturally, as an organization, we're seeing everything increase, and we're having difficult conversations in our industry to that extent. If I was to link it to MTOs, for example, where we see potential is looking at the agent network, for example. To compensate for these increases, the only way we see is to actually have a steady growth strategy, which will give you sustainability in trajectory. And looking at how your agents work effectively, what their experience is like, and unlocking some of the revenues, because naturally, if you have more and more agents who are attracted to the MTOs, it will open up more channels. And it's looking at things like we were talking about, giving them modern day technology to make things sticky, not only for them, but for their end consumer as well. So allowing them to have the ability to take payments via SMS, right? QR scan codes, payment links, opening those channels up. And then at the same time, supporting things like the alternative payment methods, deploying technology like tokenization, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, creating a seamless experience and allowing senders to have a one-click checkout, one-click payout type of a scenario. So these are the types of things we're looking at. But unfortunately, there isn't actually a solid answer to say, right, are we going to reduce costs? Because the schemes aren't. And likewise, the banks aren't either. And that's what, unfortunately, the ecosystem is having a challenge with today. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
So on that point, right? So what essentially you're saying is that given the support, if you got the support from regulators and banks, then you can achieve this. You can solve all these problems that that we've been discussing.
Absolutely, and it's going to be a long-term project, call it. But yeah, if a business is looking at sustainability, we all have to be patient and we have to weather the storm, because we will come to a point where we will effectively be in a position where we can understand how the economics are looking and make business decisions accordingly.
Very good. Any other questions? Yes, Veronica.
Hello, my name is Veronica Stusco and I'm representing MFS Africa. MFS Africa is the biggest payment hub in Africa. I have a question for Moosa. FATF is about to blacklist South Africa. I would like to have your opinion on how do you think this will affect remittances to the region? How many questions am I allowed?
As many as you want.
As many as you want.
Okay. Yeah. I have another one. And the other one is, we've been talking about digitalization, transformation, innovation. I would like to know, how can we be, with all the technologies that is there, innovative, moving towards digitalization, but inclusive? I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face with customers. So how are you guys all working on being inclusive with that? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have more if.
Yeah, on the first one, obviously, blacklist and it's grey list, but it's not good. It's not going to be good for the country. It's not going to be good for the currency. And if it's not good for the currency, it's not good for the migrant. You all of a sudden you start getting less. It's not good if you want to move money. Obviously, correspondent banking, everything becomes a problem. So in short, it will not be good. I know from what I read, the government's working super hard, to stay off that list. Whether we succeed or not, only time will tell. But yeah, in short, it's not going to be good for the country as a whole, not just for migrants using money transfer services like ourselves. In terms of what we are doing to digitize, I can speak for us. Whilst not many banks, one of the attendees mentioned, like here in the UK, does not want to bank these migrants. We've had a similar story in South Africa as well, and that is why our digital banking offering is taking off so well. We are prepared to bank people who local banks might not, kind of be interested in. So yeah, we've started on this journey. Our bank is growing pretty nicely now, and it's not that they don't want to be banked. If they just want to be banked in their environment, they feel intimidated walking to a big building, whatever it is. Maybe they're going to ask me for 15 things. They're not, but this is the mindset. So the way we do it, we have people from the community, Malawians, Zimbabweans. So Malawian goes and sign up a Malawian for a bank account at his work. Why at his work? Because we know he gets paid to, if he doesn't go to work to open up, he doesn't get paid. The employer doesn't care. Today you're not at work because you went to open up a bank account. No work, no pay. We get it. So we send our guy to you. I mean, I'm an okay guy, but even I don't get a private banker to come to my office, you know. But I make sure our customers get it. We go to them, we sign them up in the street. Within 5 minutes, you can walk away with your debit card. So these are just some of the things we do to get them digitized. Otherwise, to Hasan's point, they're not. You know, they're gonna continue to stay there, or the money will still flow. The money will flow. It's whether you want to know about it or you don't want to know about it. And obviously, our job here is to make sure we know about it. So we do go that extra mile. It's a little bit more expensive, but it does pay off in the long run.
I think you've partly answered the second question as well. But Veronica, can I just get the definition of inclusive again? What do you mean by using that? What do you mean by inclusive? And just so other panel members can also respond.
There are two things when we talk about inclusivity. One is when it comes to being banked, people to have access to financial services. But the other thing is also there are certain generations with all this technology that has been left out, or certain people that has been left out for different issues, either disabilities, either because they don't have the literacy to use this technology. So I would like to know, what should we be doing as industry in order to be inclusive with that kind of customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a range of things. Obviously, we all know about the digitization part, but we have a multilingual call center. You can operate via USSD. You can come in branch, you know, so we have our own network, along with partnering with all the major retailers and banks. So we got over 10,000 points where you could come into. So yeah, you gotta if you want to be truly inclusive, then yeah, you gotta offer a wide range. I mean, everyone's not prepared to pay this. Comes at a cost. Having 100+ call center costs money. You know, having loads of agents out there who are speaking different languages for each community costs a lot of money. But this is what you have to do if you want. All they want is access, and in order for you to give access, you got to go and get your hands dirty and go out and do this. Now, if you just come there and in any jurisdiction drop an app, no one's going to use it. No one's going to use it. You know, if there are already alternatives like that, it's never going to work. You're going to have to go out, have a cash solution, have a digital solution, have a USSD solution, have a call center solution. You have to have an all-inclusive solution to win.
An omni-channel solution, if you will.
Omni-channel, yes.
So what's your take on that? So in terms of inclusivity, Hasan?
Financial inclusion, if I were to, financial inclusion is absolutely very important. You know, we still see developed countries, let alone developing countries, that people are not banked. And, you know, and when you're not banked, then you get paid differently. When you get paid differently, Moosa said money has got to flow. So it's very important that whether from a regulatory point of view or from banking or non-banking financial institutions, for us to put the effort to accept this and allow them into this ecosystem, because again, it comes back to compliance, comes back to sustainability, it comes back to visibility and all that. If we don't have the financial inclusion for a segment of people that are not included, we will always have an alpha male, an illegal channel alpha male that is constantly growing, despite, regardless of the effort of what you're doing. Because and this is even for fintechs. I encourage them, through this forum, to start looking for solutions for these guys, because everybody comes and fights over the same, kind of customers here. But there's a lot more than what you and I think that is still unbanked and still not financially included.
So from your perspective, Sharon, from a receiving market,
yes, I was about to say, but it's a little different for us in the receiving market. But yes, financial inclusion is also a part of our strategy, because what you find, of course, most of the beneficiaries would be cash pickup. It's a 60-40. And so what we're doing to ensure that we get into the financial sector is We offer them prepaid cards because you're not required to have a bank account for a prepaid card. It's much easier for them to get in. And we have add-on services like insurance. Under normal circumstances, those clients would not have access to insurance products and services. And so we add that onto the service, and we're expecting that it will continue to grow.
Well done.
I guess just from a payments perspective, on our side, it's key to work with partners that are completely multi-channel. So really, you have solutions like being able to support processing prepaid cards, but then also at the same time having smart technology like tokenization to just make the payment friction-free, frictionless. And it's very important for us to focus on inclusion, because it is the case that we have to maximize on providing a service to anyone and everyone. So it's key that businesses focus on working with partners like us to help them achieve a service that fits everyone.
Great, thank you. Can we take some online questions, Ziad, please?
Yeah, sure. We've got some questions coming. Thank you for the questions online. And apologies in advance if I pronounced your name incorrectly. So we've got a question from Abedi Mbanda. What have been your greatest challenges from a regulatory perspective with regards to cross-border payments? We've touched on this before, but I think it'd be good to go into some more detail. Thank you.
The biggest challenges?
From a regulatory perspective with regards to cross-border payments.
Sure. I think we'll have different perspectives because we have different jurisdictions.
Yeah, from our jurisdiction is obviously, limits. We limit you in terms of what type of documentation you can provide. Obviously, you have like a light KYC, then you got a KYC and a full, so it just depends. Obviously customers always want the higher limits. Unfortunately, due to regulation, you can only work with what you got. So as much as we try and lobby and things like that, and who knows, in time things might change. But yeah, for now, I think from our side, limits are obviously are a little bit of an issue, and those are coupled with source of funds. When a lot of the guys who are sending, maybe the work that they are doing, they don't have any formal kind of, like a payslip, for example. So, he legitimately works as a gardener. He's gotten paid, but they paid him in cash. So, where does he get a formal payslip from? Now, you go try explaining that to the powers that be. It's a little bit harder than you think.
Your take? Sorry.
Yeah, so from our perspective, there's two things that we would consider. Firstly, obviously we're operating in a B2B environment rather than the MTOs, which are more consumer focused. So for us, it's very important around things like looking at the KYC processes, carrying out the due diligence, but the impact that Brexit has had around the licenses, for example, that MTOs have, and how they have usage of the corridors. That's a current challenge of ours. But then also, looking at the receiving countries as well, where the money is being sent to. But also at the same time, we look at the technical side of the processing of the funds as well, and looking at things like SCA, which is new regulations on authentication of card payments. We have to ensure that for recurring transactions, we have the right framework involved, which is known as credential on file. So there is a range of things that we are kind of navigating our way through. We do find that different schemes, payment schemes, have different interpretations on transactions. So it is a challenging environment to be in, but there is light at the end of the tunnel because we are making headway and progress with our partners as well going forward.
I think I agree with you, Habib. There's one thing that we are all not talking about, which is the inherited risk that we are tagged with as MSBs. This is one of the, I'd say, challenges that we live with as non-banking financial institutions. Today, we're constantly, but you know, the more the regulator upscales or raises the bar in terms of the, from a compliance and regulatory perspective of frameworks, I find this as an opportunity, again, for us to slowly get out of this inherited risk paint that we have been painted with, you know, in our pursuit to one day be seen like a bank.
Sharon, anything from your side?
Yes. For us in the receiving country, for B2B is just taking on, especially in Jamaica. But it's a little different in that the regulators require that we authenticate the banking information of the beneficiary, even though the beneficiary is already in a regulated entity. So we have to do all of that, including KYC. And as in a similar way as to other countries, with the tiered approach, the higher the value, more is expected of us as it relates to KYC. So it is challenging too.
I think we do need regulators and banks to be present at events like these and others, you know, as well. So we educate them and they educate us. I think that's important. One of the biggest challenges, of course, from a UK perspective that we all know is, of course, the bank account problem that these because the question is, you know, what are the biggest challenges the MTOs face? And one of the biggest challenges is getting a bank account. But I think there are some solutions now out here. And again, tech has to plays a crucial role here. And there are many solutions. I know that we're running out of time. So can we take one more question from online? Then we'll come back to our in-person audience.
Yeah, sure. We have a question from Mohammed Hadi. What are the requirements to connect remittance software to be able to deposit into client's bank account, or the client to be able to withdraw to bank account? And maybe it's a more general question. What are the good bank account solutions?
No, just repeat the question again. Sorry.
Yeah. What are the requirements to connect the remittance software to be able to deposit into client's bank account? So I guess depositing into the receiving side, or the client to be able to withdraw to bank account. So I guess more on the receiving side.
Yeah, anyone want to take that?
Well, I know in Jamaica, but when the funds are sent to us, we use the ACH RTGS, that's real-time gross settlement, to deposit the funds to the financial institution, so the clients can now make the withdrawal using their debit cards.
Hadi sounds like a fintech company who wants to do more business, so maybe he should be.
He has a question specifically for you, actually, to connect. So.
Is that for me?
Well, I mean, he did put in a question, a request to connect to you. So
yeah, it's www.alfardanexchange.com. Okay. That's what I said.
There you go, Habib.
I'm more than happy to provide any help. But again, it depends on you know, what regions and channels and amounts and limits and, you know, the whole 9 yards.
He's based in Iraq.
Sorry?
He's based in Iraq.
Iraq?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Offline, we'll talk.
Yeah,
sure. We can discuss this.
Iraq is whitelisted on FATF, so there shouldn't be a problem.
One more question from the audience, please. I've got two hands raised, Veronica, and then the gentleman here.
Very short,
yeah.
Very short, I promise you. With all the, going back to customers, we've been talking about customers and how are they changing their expectations. So we all know expectations are increasing. I would like to know we have different regions represented here. I would like to know, according to your experience, who decides on how to send the remittances, sender or receiver, in each of your regions?
I can go from our side, or from my experience, I'll say the sender. Sender has the power. You know, a request can come, but he kind of understands the obligations in the home country. He's pretty familiar of of how much it costs to run his household. So yeah, the odd request can come from the receiver, but the sender decides how, when, he's in control of the funds.
Interesting.
Again, it is sender, like Moosa has alluded to, but naturally is always a sender. But we'd like it to be the receiver, actually. We have very successful examples, case studies, like in China, for example, of calling in funds. But I think our receivers, they have been sending a lot of money. They don't have enough to cater to these calls anymore. But I think if we get to this is the pull example that I was, referring to, by calling in request for sending. But yeah, it remains the sender for now.
That's interesting.
I think it's also the sender, but I think there's a push and pull as it relates to both, because whilst it is dependent on the flows of the sender, the beneficiary also has a say in the matter, in that matter of convenience. Where is the nearest location for me to pick up?
That's right.
So that is also that also plays a part. That also plays a part. Yes.
I mean, sometimes when we send money to receiving markets, the beneficiary lives in a particular village, and there are some restrictions, so it has to be cash, it has to be this particular kiosk and on this location at this junction. So in many ways, it is the beneficiary dictating to the sender as well.
The beneficiary can dictate the where. The beneficiary is not dictating the how much, the when. It just depends. I mean, if I got a piece job and I don't work, how am I going to send it to you? So yes, you can ask for it, but it would depend on whether the sender actually has it. Yeah, the where, of course, it's the most convenient pickup point, which obviously the receiver would determine, but that's not what really matters, right? I mean, if you really have to go travel 10 minutes to go and get this money, you'd travel and you'd go get it.
Of course, they have to. Yeah. David, you had a question?
It's David from Pacific Way in Australia. David from Australia. My question goes back to the challenges in obtaining bank accounts, and it's still very real in our environment, and we're forced to operate on the outer channels of the banking system. So, credit unions, boutique banks, where we operate.
This is in Australia?
In Australia, right. Yes. And obviously presents a huge challenge for cross-border payments. Obviously, the channels that we're currently operating in do not have, the facilities to go through making, especially B2B payments, where you've got to fund the other side. So, my question is obviously to the panel, how has that channel evolved over the, especially the last two years? Obviously, when cash was there, it's a lot more flexible for us to operate. And given the digital evolution has pushed a lot of transactions into the main banking system. So therefore, you end up collecting more in your bank accounts and moving that, from those wider channels to your, offices overseas has been a real challenge. So I'm interested to hear how that channel has evolved digitally as well in the last 2 years especially. There are opportunities there or not?
I mean, in the UK, we obviously have similar challenges, but there is evolution that has taken place, and there are licensed entities that are providing bank accounts. They have an agreement with some of these banks in the industry that provide bank accounts to this MTO licensed entity, and the MTO will sub-account to others. So that's one solution that they've done. I know there are a few players here in Europe and the UK that are doing that. Even from the payments industry, there has been evolution. If anybody wants to add anything to this.
I know in Australia that MSPs are finding it difficult to maintain bank accounts, but I also know that many MSPs do have bank accounts. So it really is about the maturity of these institutions and the type and kind of compliance frameworks that they have. Look, it is very important for banks to understand the consequences of this, because, like I said, if money has got to flow, money has got to flow. And if banks are not going to enable that for MSBs to hold these accounts and put whatever restrictions you want, whatever limits you want, whatever, compliance requirements you want, but you have to enable. I think this becomes a responsibility on these banks to do. But it's always easier to de-risk and say no and pull your hands from troubles, because payments generally for banks is not something that they favor. They don't like it, and that's why we're here to do what we are doing. But I think regulators have to step in. Regulators have to step in. Regulators have to allow players, especially the more compliant, the more famous ones and the known ones, to be able to hold these accounts purely for settlement reasons. And
I mean, we've seen people trying, companies, startups, fintech companies, even established companies in different regions, trying different routes to get licensed. So over here, for example, in the UK, you have different types of licenses. You have SPIs, APIs, EMIs, AEMIs, PISPs, AISPs, and so on. So people, EMIs, and they'll try different routes. If they try SPI, they get rejected, they'll try another. I mean, these are some of the things that are happening right now that we witness, being on the forefront. So different type. Do they have a similar license, like a complex licensing structure in Australia, or?
Unfortunately not. I was listening there before with how the regulatory bodies can enable growth, and unfortunately, I see them as a major block to the growth of the industry over there. They're like a toothless tiger, really. They put all the regulations and compliance in place, but they just won't help you.
Yeah.
If the bank closes you tomorrow, you're done.
Yeah.
Because look, if they don't pay attention to this, what's happening is there's a parallel ecosystem that is also developing, which is an intra-settlement ecosystem, which is very dangerous. There's no visibility, no sight over that. So I think it's very important that this is paid attention to.
Yeah. Let's discuss this. We'll continue with the discussions after I think we're out of time. Yeah, Sajid, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.